Hello, it is I, your favorite neighborhood lesbian, and welcome back again, guys, to Gay Tea. Now, today I wanted to talk about something, well, a few different things. They all kind of relate to each other, but, it definitely has a lot to do with personal stuff as well today, so yeah. Now, a while back on my podcast, I talked about the situation with a friend that I called in that series of podcasts Cindy, and I'm going to continue to call her that because continuity in this situation does matter. Now, you don't need to see those podcasts. In fact, I will be explaining the situation more or less in its entirety. So, yeah, if you want some extra added context along with details that I may or may not include in today's video, go ahead and feel free to check it out. There will be a link to the podcast as a whole in the description down below. But, as far as this video is concerned, you're probably not going to need to listen to it. Now, as the title suggests, today we're going to be talking about coming out. And the reason why this stuff with Cindy and other things I'll be talking about later relate to that will become very apparent. Coming out is possibly one of the most stressful things that you can do. It doesn't necessarily have to be stressful, however. If you have yourself surrounded by the right kinds of people, the right kinds of family, just the right people in general, it will be but a passing comment of which you'll be coming out with. But when it comes to people who you know, especially for certain you know, aren't gonna necessarily be okay with it, that's where the stress of it really comes in. Now, of course, manifestation can still be used. You can still, if you believe in God or other types of divine forces, feel free to contact them however you wish. But, yeah, you can still hope for the situation. At the very least, you can hope for it to be better, or at least the best outcome. Because when it comes to manifesting things, I feel like, personally, there's a lot that goes into it. Not just personally, but when it comes to other people as well. Other people's energies and strong wants can often block your own energy and keep you from getting what you want at times. And that can be very unhealthy. And this is a part of coming out as well. And the reason why is because other people could be using their energies, however which way that they use them, in order to block you. And I think that was part of what was happening with Cindy, which I'll be getting into more in a minute. But yeah, so important to know that you can use manifestation in order to make the situation overall better if you know you're going into it with somebody who may not necessarily be on your side when it comes to these things. And also keep in mind that other people's energies can also block you from getting what you're manifesting. Especially if it's in relation to, well, coming out. But yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about is coming out on your own terms. You want to make sure you come out on your own terms. While at first it may sound like a good idea to just try and hide your identity forever or whatever, this is not a good plan in the long run. And I know that there may be some of you out there thinking, well, why would I do that in the first place? And and that's because some people only feel safe in just not talking about it. And that's where I was for a very while there with Cindy. I figured if I just didn't talk about it, eventually the problem would go away, or I would change her mind or something. But sadly, that is not usually the case, especially with Cindy. Yet again, we'll be getting into that more in a minute. But yeah, it is best to be as upfront as possible about it. With whoever this happens to be. like I said before, if it's with people that, are probably going to take it well, or are most likely to take it well, then it can be just as easy as just a passing comment, like how I came out to my best friend, Calypso. For her and I, it was just a passing comment when we were playing a game online on Roblox. I happened to find a section in the Customize Your Avatar area, which happened to have Pride-themed sweatshirts, and I put one on, and I said that I was bisexual. Now, of course, saying that I was bisexual was just a filler for the moment because I didn't actually know if I was bi, blah blah blah. More about how I came to become lesbian in the previous gay tea episode. But yeah, so it was as simple as that. Neither of us batted an eye. We both had fun with it. And that was really what propelled basically all of my main friend group, it feels like, into each coming out onto their own in whatever way. So, yeah, it was just that simple. But with Cindy, it wasn't as simple as that. Now, even when it comes to the differences between close friendships, there are differences. And there were heavy differences from the very beginning with Cindy. Here's a little bit of context for you. You see, how we met was quite a few years ago, back before I knew that I was a part of the community in any way, shape, or form. Long before I even thought about possibly being bisexual. And not too long before I really started to discover with myself, well, maybe I was trans or gender fluid or something of that nature. Because, in fact, I was experimenting with my gender before my sexuality. But all in all, it isn't as important. The only important part of it is that it was before I knew anything. At least concrete. So, yeah, it was a nice summer at the RV park that we were staying at, and I happened to be doing some friend scouting, and my parentals were helping me with that as well, because luckily for us, we were living on a spot on an end cap of a row that was positioned to be looking right at a playground, which is where oftentimes people would hang out. And I just like to go over there and hang out there and things like that. Even though I was a bit older, it was still fun to mess around and to play around on that thing. And oftentimes there would be people younger than me, older than me. It didn't really matter to me at the time, just as long as I got to have some human interaction. So then one day, Cindy happened to show up there, and I rushed out and I met with her, and we had a very fun time. We spent the entire week that she was staying there together. We were long-termer, me, parentals, and I, we were long-termers, so we were staying for quite a while. But they were just there for their yearly vacation. So, of course, I went over, we had fun together, we hung out, we went to the beach, all sorts of things. We did a whole lot of bonding in just a week. And at the very end of it, on the very day that they were leaving, we decided to exchange numbers and keep it on. So after a bit of a number debacle, because at the time I had an Android and she had an Apple phone, which meant we couldn't text each other. So yeah, that wasn't fun for a minute there, but we were able to get into contact and stay in contact until I was able to get an Apple phone myself and move her contact onto there. But not too long after this, some personal things went down with her, which of course I helped her with, as any good pals would do. And then eventually she said that we were going to have to send letters to each other. I said okay to this, and that was kind of the end of us being on the phone together. Now, I'm not sure what exactly led to her not having her phone to contact people with anymore, but I'm assuming it's some sort of personal thing. I have no idea, but it's not for me to know, and I never, even when we were friends, I never had a right to ask, so I didn't. So there's that. So after we weren't able to call or text each other anymore, we started sending letters. And this is where I really got to see the first warning signs. Now, yet again, I didn't know at this point that I was necessarily a part of the community. I think by this point, I considered myself to be an ally, but I wasn't really in the community. One interesting moment to note is that when we had first met on that little swing set at that little playground thing, I had talked about some characters that I made for a game that I was playing with a friend, and had talked about how basically two of them were lesbians, and she immediately shut me down and said that her and her family didn't talk about that. Now, I just kind of paused with an O and just moved on to a different conversation, but looking back at it now, it starts to fall into place with some other things. So, we went on doing these letters together and things of that nature, and we went on talking about as normally as one could. And I ended up finding out in a letter one day that her and her family weren't exactly into trans people either, and were actively against them. I won't recite the exact comment, but first off, I just don't want to, and second off, it feels too personal to do the exact comment, but yeah, it didn't feel good to me whatsoever. Now, I must admit I was in a different headspace then, so I was this close to going on an angry rant in my next letter, but something told me to get some advice from me mama, and I did, and so I decided not to do that, and just didn't mention it at all. But from then on left a seed in me of doubt in our little friendship, which by this point was kind of turning into a sisterhood, because she really did consider me to be family at this point. And she later said, especially so because she had stuck with me throughout all that time of us just sending letters to each other. It was actually for about a year and a half, maybe even longer, where we would just send letters. I know at least one Christmas went by where I sent her a letter, so it was at least a year. So now we start flashing forward to me going through various identities. First pansexual, then omnisexual, then demi-omnisexual, demi-girl, and then all of these things, and but we do stop before I realize that I am a trigender lesbian, because this is the point where we meet up finally again. Now, for the last few years, we couldn't meet up because of various things. Her family had some stuff going on, so they just couldn't flat out make some trips, and so yeah, we couldn't meet up. But we did get to meet up. So yeah. So we ended up meeting up, and this was when I knew that I was part of the community, for sure. Like I said, I was the demi-omnisexual, demi-girl that you all used to know me as. So, yeah. And I was honestly quite surprised to find out that the summer was going on. You see, up until that point, I got the distinct feeling that perhaps the reason why we didn't see each other as often as we would have liked to, aside from the other family things going on that were preventing the vacations, I definitely don't blame them for that stuff. There was, like, some medical things going on with her family and things like that, so I completely understand why they wouldn't be coming over here. But I suspected that aside from all of that stuff, that her family weren't really into me. You see, a big part of Cindy and her family's life is their faith. They are very much believers of God and the Bible and things like that. And I honestly don't see there being anything truly wrong with that. But it's just their specific set of beliefs that they decided to have and to take on that really became the problem. Like I said, homophobia and transphobia. Now, other than the comments, like I said before, they hadn't really become too much of a problem up until this point. But also keep in mind that I hadn't come out up until this point either. So I was very nervous about it. And I figured I will leave the gender stuff aside for now and just talk about my sexuality when we met up in real life again. That way we could just focus on one thing first, and hopefully my sexuality would go over well, much better than the gender thing, because and this will become important in a minute. So we get to meet up for that summer, and on the very first day I decide I gotta get this out of the way now because it's important, and if things are gonna end, it might as well end now before I spend an entire week with her and make her feel like I betrayed her trust or something crazy, which is never what I wanted her to think or to feel, but I feel like she probably felt that towards the end. We'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah. So on that first day, as we were walking, and we were talking about certain things that had changed and how some things really hadn't changed at all, and I said something along the lines of, yeah, not much has changed with me other than the fact that I'm a part of the LGBTQ plus community now. Now, I probably said something more along the lines of the gay community or just the LGBT community, because I didn't necessarily expect her to know what exactly LGBTQ plus meant, because, well, I mean, if they were against it, why would they necessarily learn the terms for it, It made sense to me. So yeah, I probably went with something simpler than that, but that's basically what I said. And she just kind of stopped for a moment, and we stopped walking, and she looked at me and she asked, "So are you gay?" And she really did say it in more of a hushed voice, which, yet again, should have been probably another warning sign. But I said, sort of. At this point, I must admit that I didn't handle this the best. And sort of isn't really an answer. And I kind of followed that up with, well, I love all people, or something of that nature. Which, I think probably would have gotten which at the time made sense that I probably would have gotten across the point that I was at the very least pan or bi or just whatever term that she knew. But yeah, so, I figured at the very least that would come across. Because I wasn't necessarily up for explaining what demi-omnisexual meant. And of course, like I said, I left out the entire part about the demi-girl because I didn't want to get into the whole gender thing, because especially up until that point, most of the really crude comments were transphobic. So yeah. But like I said, there was only really the ones, so I figured, I'll just get back to that another time. So, yeah, we go through the week, we end up, having a nice time, really enjoying ourselves and all of that. And it was honestly a fun time, except for some comments. Yet again, coming back to the homophobic and especially the transphobic thing. Like I said before, it's not like, she isn't homophobic at all. But she is, her and her family definitely are more on the transphobic side. Like, they crack down a little bit harder on pronouns and gender than they did, homophobia. So, or on gays. So, yeah. Yet again, another reason why I thought that would be easier. And throughout the whole entire thing, I just kind of, I tried to brush it off, but also bring up comments such as, I tried to bring up, like, neutral comments when it came to those things. Might have been going slightly towards, slightly more positive side towards, transgender and gay communities and things like that. But I tried my best to be, at the very least, neutral about it. I figured maybe I could just gently, change her mind throughout time. But yeah, so after that week was done and gone, it led me to thinking about it. And thinking about a lot of stuff that I had seen transpire over that week. Because as I talked about in my podcast, it wasn't necessarily just the homophobia or the transphobia either. There were a lot of beliefs in their household and in the particular way that they represented their culture that I wasn't really for. I didn't necessarily get angry or upset. I kept my cool, even inside of my head. But there were a lot of things that left me to wonder, like, is this really how they saw the world? Because I must admit, there were some beliefs and some views that were a bit scary to me. But I don't really want to go into them. Because right now, we're kind of focusing on the pride stuff. And all that other stuff is very deep and very bleh. So, yeah. Not that they're necessarily doing anything wrong. But to me personally, it doesn't give me a good feeling. And I'm thinking that part of those beliefs and things probably come from a place of fear, is what I'm thinking. Just fear for all sorts of different reasons and for all sorts of different things. So I don't think they necessarily think wrong or do wrong. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it does give me a very uncomfortable feeling thinking about those things. So let us just move on. So, yeah. Now we move on to after the fact. Now, of course, by now, I'm starting to see clearer and clearer that sooner or later, this was probably going to be over. Because I was already kind of thinking that before the summer, just based off of the few comments in the letters themselves. Now I had a whole week to think about, a whole week's worth of very good times, don't get me wrong, but also some interesting beliefs and values and comments that I wasn't for. So, now what does a Dharmi do? Well, what a Dharmi does is, she, just kind of assesses the situation. So, now we fast forward quite a few months. Up until most recently, actually. When she, got her number back and was able to call and text me again and FaceTime and things like that. all the things that we did before we went to the letters. But now I was going in a lot more concerned, especially about some of the things that she would say. Because, you know, I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be criticized or judged or anything like that, even on accident. Because don't get me wrong, throughout this whole entire thing, Cindy and even her family have been very sweet, very kind, and very loving towards me. I definitely became a part of the family there for a good bit, especially after that recent week in summer. But what I also knew was that I was a quote-unquote wolf in sheep's clothing. You know, I was very different from the rest of the herd. You know, and in fact, it wasn't even my herd. It wasn't even... For as much as I considered myself to be a part of their family there for a second, I wasn't. At the end of the day, I'm not. I'm really not. And furthermore, I just... me being myself right now in this moment, I'm not sure how I could have been a part of their family for longer than a week. I'm not sure if I could have done another go back, because originally what the plan was after that summer week was, that recent summer week was, I was just gonna write it out. I couldn't write it out. In the end, I don't think I would have wanted to write it out. I just felt terrible. Cindy made me feel terrible about myself. She didn't even mean to, but she did. She wore the sweetest smile and had the happiest face while she told me that I was wrong. Another thing that happened in that recent summer week, on that first day after I told her, was if she thought. I asked her, "Do you think I'm going to hell?" That's what I did. And initially she gave me an answer that gave me a lot of respect for her. But it wasn't exactly right. And, you know, for as kind and as calm and respectful as she was throughout this whole entire thing, I just don't think I can see any way of this working. Because even after those conversations on that first night, she had me questioning everything about myself. Her sweet words were good, but they didn't break me. I cried, I felt upset, I questioned myself, but at the end of the day, I just reaffirmed who I was. She didn't mean to hurt me. I don't think she necessarily wanted to break me either, but after that, I knew I couldn't do it again. I had thought about just not going the next day, next week, next year, no more letters. But I'd stick it out at least one more day. Maybe said I was busy or something for the rest of the week. Maybe say something came up with family or something of that nature, if I needed to get out. Luckily, I didn't feel that way for the rest of that week. But, yet again, probably should have seen this coming. You see, I knew for a really long time that this was going to come to an end, but I thought it was going to come to an end when I was, like, getting married to my wife or something. I thought that that would be the breaking point. Years and years into the future, long before, you know, not just 2 months ago. I didn't think it would happen. I didn't think it would be happening then. Right after she was able to call and text me again, but It was only like 2 FaceTimes in where the plug was about pulled. Basically, what had happened was on one of the calls, one of the normal calls before everything went sideways, was we were talking about stuff, and she was talking about a character that was gay in a show, and how she initially sounded like she was outraged that this character was gay in the first place, and I told her, and I just came right out with it, and I was like, you do realize I'm gay, right? She immediately backtracked and was like, no, it's just because it happened in the finale and we didn't get build up and things like that. And I didn't think anything of it after the fact. Just kind of laughed it off. But then she came back to me. And she called me again, just to confirm that I was gay. Now, some of you may be questioning and wondering, why does this matter? It matters a lot. Because I didn't need to do this with Calypso. I didn't need to do this with a friend I'm just going to call Jay. I didn't need to do this with any other person in my life. Except for Cindy. Now, yet again, I don't think she necessarily meant anything by it. But it still meant something. It meant that no matter what, her family, both, they were going to judge me. No matter what. You don't make a confirmation call for that. You don't do that. And I didn't even realize how wrong this was until long afterwards. After me and Mama got back from a trip, and I talked with her about it, and she told me. That's not right. And the whole reason why the call took place in the first place was because Cindy was talking with her dad and told him about it. I don't necessarily currently have a problem with the fact that she told her dad about it, because universe knows that I wouldn't have told him, but that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. But yeah. After that confirmation call, I thought we were okay. Because I could have sworn for a moment there, I was so afraid that her parents were just gonna cut her off from me. Because, unlike her, they weren't gonna make any sort of exception for me. So yeah. And when I was so glad that that wasn't the case, I forgot about the other part of it. And that was that they were never gonna stop judging me for who I was. And that's the part that sucks. Because even her, without realizing it or just without thinking about it, she was gonna keep judging me. So yeah. Not long after that, I looked back and I realized things were not okay. Things were not fine. And something came up to where I kind of accidentally gave my ending dialogue for the whole entire friendship And after the misunderstanding was resolved, she said that she knew I wasn't fine and that we needed to talk. So, after a little while of dread, finally did. And that was the second to last call. And I told her almost everything. I told her who I was and why things couldn't work out the current way that they were going to. And we both mutually decided to give each other roughly a week to think about it. Mostly for the fact that during the weekend she was going to come back from service on one of the days where she'd be closest to God and, get guidance from Him. So I figured, yeah, and it'll give me more time to think about it and maybe change my answer. Because at that point I already had one. So yeah. But the very next night, almost out of the blue, she called me again. And that was the last call. Cindy tried to negotiate terms with me. She tried to, suggest ideas such as we'll only talk about certain topics and things like that, but I put my foot down. And I told her, look, I only want to surround myself with people who love me and appreciate me and will be there for me exactly the way I am. And yeah. And I also told her that I didn't want us to have to censor parts of ourselves, especially because of the fact that in the end, the only one being censored would have been me. Because I didn't have much of a problem whatsoever with her beliefs and things like that. I didn't have much of a problem with the way that she thought and her values and things like that. I didn't mind too much when she would occasionally say like a line from the Bible or something, or talk about a Bible story. The only time I minded those things were when she used things from the Bible to back up her point of homophobia and transphobia. But other than that, it never really bothered me. But all of those things about me bothered her. And because we had been friends for so long, and only because of that, we only because we were friends for so long did she remain friends with me afterwards. Like, if we had met and I had come out to her, none of this would have happened. So yeah. So I knew, if I had even entertained the idea of negotiations of what we would be talking about, she'd maybe put a few things down of what she couldn't talk about, but I would have to put almost my entire life down. And that's not cool. We tried for so long to ignore the differences between our cultures and our beliefs. We tried our best to make it work, but one of the things that she said in that last call, one of the things she asked me is, why are you making me choose between you and my faith? And To be fair, I could have asked the exact same question. But I didn't. So yeah. No matter which side you chose, one would be asking the other why. Why are you making me choose between you and who I am, and what I believe, and my family, and my culture, and my community? All of that would have replied. Because for as much as we tried to bridge the gap, we came from two very different worlds. And they only collided by sheer luck and timing. It's too bad things couldn't have been different. She still has my number and other ways to contact me. If she kept any of those old letter envelopes, she'd also have, of course, where to send mail to. She has me mama's phone number. Other things too. My emails. She has a lot of ways to get back in contact with me if she ever decides it's time, or if she ever changes her mind. I know I'm not changing mine. So yeah, if we ever become friends again, I guess it's mainly up to her at this point. But I'm not so sure if it'll ever happen. I hope that wherever she is now and whatever she's doing, she's living her best life. Finds the husband of her dreams. Has kids if she wants them. Dream home. Dream job. Gets to become a singer-songwriter. Or at least have it as a hobby. Finish her book series, maybe. But that's about it. I hold no resentment or angry feelings. Mostly sad. Because in the end, it's just one last person that won't be invited to the wedding. So yeah. If you guys want to see and hear more from me, go ahead and check out the links in the podcast episode description down below. Check out the rest of the channel, or that other stuff. Either way, you'll be supporting me. And yeah. I didn't mean for it to have such a glum and sour note. It's just life sometimes. Sometimes it's just not what it could be. Sometimes you think maybe there can be better outcomes, but there really can't. But you can always try. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one.